All right, well, welcome back everybody to our third and final day of this new live stream workshop. We're happy to have you join in. If you were able to join us the last 2 days, that's great. Just as a reminder, I always encourage people to email us and send us questions. So this is the third day, this is our last day, so a lot of it will have, a lot of our conversation will be centered around that. So I'm going to let Rick kind of start off about what he's thinking about doing, and then I'll join in.
Yeah, okay. Well, interesting here is that, a lot of the materials and, the base, the substrate that I'm using is different. This is something that Michael gave me, and it's prepared differently, so the ground is different. And I'm actually I'm going to be trying out a different pigment. So it's, and a different medium. What is the name?
Oleores gel.
Oleores gel. Usually I use Williamsburg Galkid. It's an alkyd type of medium, and I'm used to that. So this is going to be pretty much an on-camera experiment in a way, because now I'm working into the second day. I want the paint to be a little bit fatter over this lean surface here. I don't want to be adding something with a lot of turpentine or thinners to it, because the solvents actually destroy the integrity of the paint. And we had a discussion this morning actually about that very thing, about the paint cracking that surface of the film there. So what I'm going to do, I was just thinking about it here, is I'm going to float in with a little bit of medium. I'm going to thin out this resin gel and tone it in areas so that I have an average in different portions of my painting here. And then I'm going to paint into that surface. And that's the thinking so far. So
Now, is that something that you would have done before? Is that possibly where I got that idea? Because that's something that
do you do that?
I do, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, was there times back in the day where you would like use the background and paint back into it?
Oh yeah,
okay.
I a lot of time. What I do now a lot actually is I'll float in a tone, almost like a haze over it, and then work into that. And I love that softness. To me, it almost contributes to an atmosphere.
Yeah.
You know, that it gives it a little bit more of a vaporous type of look to it. I kind of saw that as, one person I really liked, and to me it was Bouguereau actually, as he was in his 60s. His paintings to me changed over time when you see the show and you walk through it chronologically, and it was like the early things he did had a clarity there, and then as he moved through the years, it seems like there was like an atmosphere. It seems like the painting was inside that surface, and that's what I'm trying to look through, that surface, and that's where I'm putting that down, trying to simulate it. At least that's the way I see it. Did you notice that when you saw the show? Was that one of your observations?
Not that particular observation, but I was just wondering in my own development, like, because in New York they very rarely like create overpaint sections then to paint back into.
Oh, really?
They're usually, a lot of their edges are dealt with being really precise in value. So rather than a physical mixing of paint on the surface, they're creating, and I can do a really quick illustration. So if I have two values here, I have a dark value and a light value. If there's a hard edge that exists in the middle, the way that they would handle that most of the time is they would match it with the perfect value. So then optically it disappears.
Right.
And so they're very particular about corresponding their value with the plane that they're seeing up there. So wherever it's tipping in space, that's the value that they ought to be hitting. And that's what gives everything a soft edge, rather than doing this.
Right, okay.
That's a physical kind of
right.
blending. And that's what we're talking about by taking that background overriding the stuff and then painting back into it. That's a physical kind of
Yeah.
optical.
But there's then if you're doing these edges, I mean, to connect, I mean, if you are wanting to get the edge of, say, this leaf pattern to the background, you wouldn't float a note. You would just work independently into that background and then the leaf on the second day. I mean,
I would float a note, but they wouldn't.
Oh, they wouldn't. Well,
that's where I was wondering where
that's
it
where
came from.
But they wouldn't float anything over. You're saying
For the most part, no. Oftentimes they'll even paint they'll even finish the thing and then paint the background later.
Oh.
Or they'll paint the background first, kind of similar to Phantom Latour, and they will never touch, they'll scrape out the background and they'll paint the flowers into it. And the background will be dry when they're painting into it. So the atmosphere that's created is a value.
Just
Pure
matching
straight-
it. So when you're matching, if you're going to paint that leaf on top, then you're matching that edge value with
Yeah.
your background.
So if it disappears, it's because you hit the right value and it just fades back.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mm.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's one thing that's kind of exciting. Is there's many ways to go about this stuff.
I want to point out that I just changed the orientation of my palette for the camera, so it's not a secret.
Just plug this in here. So actually, when I'm doing this, I'm actually floating it into this section in here too.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not just up to the edge, but actually overlaps. And I'm making sure I am putting the resin gel along with it as I'm doing that. So.
I'm actually going to go in and take a little bit of Gamsol and Pier oleo gel and just go in and kind of reestablish some stuff and get the darks to come out in my painting.
All right.
Because it's the last day, I wouldn't recommend that on like your normal painting process, because you start to accumulate layers of oil that may sit on top of one another without any paint. So it can get too oily, but in this case I'm controlling it with some Gamsol and just spreading very kind of thin throughout the painting some oil.
Get back into that edge.
We had talked a little bit about the ground being absorbing. Yesterday I mentioned that kind of my painting's dry because the ground absorbs it so much. And so, Rick, you kind of experienced, so because you're using this ground for the first time.
I feel a definite difference from what I normally use. And so this is definitely something that's new for me. I can feel the that ground pulling the oils down into it, and I'm going to borrow all my canvases from you from now on. So that's.
Is it something that you like? Do you like the absorption?
I do.
You do?
Well, let me hold on that till
Until
after.
the end of the day.
we'll see how that goes. No, I think right now I do.
So I'm going in again with the background for the same reasons as yesterday. I try to use this time to reestablish the atmosphere, so I'm going and looking at some brushstrokes that I may not want, making edges.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was just listening to. We all good?
So I am trying to stay back, stay loose. That's the one thing I think for me is not to lose that freedom and lightness. If I see things, for me, I think I'm pretty much impulsive with my painting. I just like to keep it kind of fresh for me, and that's why I like to be broad here in the last day. I like standing back and making sure that I don't get too close and too tight in the beginning here.
Mm.
There you go. I'll use a different brush, I think, for that bottom part here, for the tabletop. In the resin gel, I'm going to pick a little bit of that red. Transparent. One of the things I forget if we did talk about that as far as using watercolors.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, I'm picking up more of a alizarin and my Indian yellow. You don't use an Indian yellow, do you?
No.
Indian yellow, I really like Indian yellow because it's a transparent, dark yellow.
Mm.
Yours would be raw sienna, is that what you have burnt sienna and...
Burnt sienna and cad yellow pale would probably be something that would get in that direction. It's
okay.
I'll mix it and see if it. I don't know what your.
It's a dark, transparent. What I'm thinking about is transparent,
like something
oranges,
like
in that category. Yeah.
That's So I'd use because this is really the Winsor Newton burnt sienna is really translucent.
Okay.
And then this is my only option to go in that direction.
Okay, because that's part of the thing for me is that those yellows, like we were talking about the other day, the inside of those flowers have so much of a yellow, kind of glowing yellow on the inside.
Yeah.
And if you use too much cadmiums or something, they're so thick you can't get them transparent enough, and then you try to add something to darken them and they become dirty looking. So it's getting something that's really transparent, dark enough. So actually I'm reaching across to darken that down here and neutralize it. So I'm using my green here, across the way, and making it dark. And these both are very transparent, so I can, but like I said, I'm actually going to pollute that a little bit here because I don't want to get it too dark. But I want it darker than that, so let's remix that. I'm going to float that right over that. There we go. you know. It's funny, it seems quieter a Sunday morning for us.
Yeah, most definitely. When I start to concentrate on my painting, I start to fade on the conversational aspect.
That's probably a good thing. Yeah, that's.
But you can discuss. I was listening actually. You can discuss anything that.
Yeah, so I have this dark for me back there. I'm gonna just keep this. Keep it pretty dark. I think that'll work better. Darker value there. You know what I'm going to use is that reducing lens. Again, for me, that really helps to be able to stand back to see the whole thing. You know, one thing about this reducing lens, it's hard if you put that into Google search or something. It does come up, but they're hard to find, from what I've been told. I have several, so I keep a bunch of these in my studio for my students to use, to just borrow for the day while they're in there. But they also are called quilter's glasses. That's it, quilters. And that makes sense because when you're doing a quilt, when you think about it, it's these fabric patterns, and a lot of them have pattern or some kind of textural kind of feeling inside. So you're using these fabrics, and you want the overall sense of that unity, how it's going to work next to another one. So you need to stand back, and so this is called a quilter's glass. So if you are looking, maybe that would be a search you could do too, quilter's glass. They probably have an app.
An app to mimic
there's an app for everything. I'm sure there's an app out there for that.
I was wondering if we could hold it in front of the lens and show what it does.
Oh yeah, yeah. Again, yeah.
About that, yes. So move this one. So it just makes everything smaller, right?
Yeah, it reduces down that field. Now, it's really beneficial when you are
that way. Pull the glass away.
Away? Yeah, what's really good about it is when you're out in the landscape field, you want to be able to paint something that's in the distance, actually through a window. You don't want to paint right down to your feet and to the zenith above you. And in fact, I heard, I don't know where I read this, but I remember someone talked about a window several feet away from you that you look through, and that's going to be your landscape. I'm thinking about one person, I don't remember his last name, Sid. I told you about Sid. I came out to New Hampshire, and this was years ago, to paint with him, and this is a true story. For one thing, let me just say, he took me all around the Metcalf, Willard Metcalf areas, and what was interesting is that he took me to an area where Metcalf painted, and we went through this entire woods. I remember parking our truck, walking through this woods, and then a field, and then we came to a stream, and then we actually went across the stream to a little island that was in the center, and we stood there, and then he pulls out of his pocket a black and white reproduction of the painting.
Yeah, that's neat.
And we were standing right there, and that to me was really cool, to see what he was seeing and to know. And the cool thing about that was that we went to the town because you could see one of the buildings in there. We had a little lunch at a deli there, and And the owner of the deli, we showed him that whole thing with the paper and all. And he was so excited to yell back for his wife. She was back in the kitchen area there, and it was really neat.
Because they were familiar with Metcalf.
They didn't know anything about it.
Oh, they didn't?
They didn't know, anything about it. We told them, we said, actually, your building is in, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So perhaps they put a little flyer next to it saying, eat here, or something. I don't know, but it was pretty cool. But getting back to what I was saying, Sid, one time, we went out landscape painting, and he said, I think we're going to do a bridge I like to do. And we were driving along, and he pulls over, and we got out, and I'm looking for a bridge. And I thought, well, maybe we got to hike to it. And he kind of stood next to it, and he started looking down at a bridge which was about a mile away. Honestly, I mean, this was far away. And I said, are you serious? He said, yeah, because you need to paint the air. And I was like, so it was really, I don't know if he's trying to make a point, because I was early in my painting, or else he was just, really, so he definitely was standing back. But that stands out in my mind about having a window. You're not actually painting right there, your field of vision. So what that lens does, it helps you to compose. And I found it to be very, very helpful in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny.
So I'm just trying to think, because can I see it really quick?
Oh. Yeah.
Because I think, I think what I do is I do this.
Yeah, but it's different. You see how small that makes it?
Right. So this gives you the distance.
Yeah, that
so it's composing and distance.
Well, when you use that, it compresses everything you're looking at. So now it becomes really tiny. So you see the bigger relationships.
I hear you. So the main advantage is that it will allow that almost just step back and.
Yeah, and it just helps you to be able to, well, for one thing, if you have it so that you have tape around it, you can compose right.
It's almost like a CLO painting.
Yeah. So exactly. Right. So it's framing it in. So you and then I use it to draw. That's the way I began my paintings every time. Is I didn't use linear lines around the outside. I actually used the imagery right here and use the shapes that were made around there. So I kind of can tell what's in the center, what's 3/4 of the way up, where does this fall off, and it really helps me to be able to make a decision there. So, yeah.
That's great.
Also, if you want to paint postage stamps, it really helps you to do that. Miniatures, very small paintings.
It seems to be a popular thing on Instagram. I don't know if you've noticed, but
what is that? The
miniatures? Yeah. Anything that can kind of just make it step outside the ordinary is usually popular on Instagram.
I didn't know that. How miniature? I mean, like 5x7s?
2x2.
Really? 2x2.
Like a little, like if I did a floral painting like this big. Really? Same painting, but this big.
Oh.
I mean, they used to do that in the 18th century, little portraits, and put them in little necklaces.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
see.
This is going to be a little tricky going over these parts now. I have the outside of this pulled in there. I pulled over my edges here. Now I want to float something over this area here. Well, what am I going to float? The one thing about it too is I try to stay on the warmer side, knowing that as I'm going to be adding paint, it's going to cool down. So it's gonna look a little wrong here for a bit, but I'll paint into that. It looks dirty right now for me, but I believe this will work out.
So on my third day, the mixtures I find tend to start to get much more broken. So remember I talked about the idea of staying fresh and having fresh paint upon fresh paint.
Mm-hmm.
So when I do this kind of thing, I start to try to get more broken notes and they become tinier. And I use smaller brushes. So all of a sudden my mixtures start to become little scratches of color notes that I'm trying to incorporate in the piece. More oil. And of course, everyone's welcome to submit questions. So I'll keep reiterating that. I'm tempted to open up my phone, but there's same with radio. People don't really understand how to turn down their radios and call in.
Oh.
So they would have to mute their TV or computer and then call me.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But I've wanted to do that.
Oh,
so,
is that right? Okay,
they can call and ask a question, have a conversation with us.
Oh. Oh, that would be
That would be great,
interesting,
because
yeah.
you can just put it on speakerphone, they could hear everything.
Oh, that would be...
But they would have to turn down their...
Well, did you ever do that before?
I haven't done it yet.
And then the last couple of days, we've had a couple of people email it to say that they've submitted one question,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's basically said thank you, and they don't get the form back once they ask one question.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting.
I had a look into it, so there's no reason why she would do that other than this bit of a glitch.
Okay.
So everyone should be able to ask as many questions as they want. Really.
Okay.
So maybe just refresh your browser, and you ask a question, it might bring it back up.
Also, info@eastokstudio.com is that's where they all go. So it's the same email as our normal email. So if you just want to, instead of using the form box, you can just submit emails to us. The only issue there is we would ask that if you're rewatching this later, not to continue to submit questions because we don't answer them after this is done.
Oh, that's... Okay, that's good to know.
Hmm.
Mm.
Because it would just be too much work if like a month later they have a question for you about color and Kelly has to try to answer.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm also focusing, my mixtures tend to be very vivid still, but when I get to the third day, I start to focus much more on specifics. And you'll notice the first day I'm doing this big, broad kind of lay-in, but then as it gets closer and closer to the finish, I start to think in my head about what I don't like in my painting, and then whatever I don't like, then I just invest a little bit more time in it and try to make it nice.
More brown here. Well, yeah, I think, you know, I go back and forth on that. If I'm happy with things, then I could see that I would be along that line of continuing that procedure. If I want to do adjustments, then I want to feel the liberty to be able to change things. If you don't like the way something is going, then...
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
like we had talked about sanding out.
Right.
Yeah, right. I've changed the colors of the background, you know, from dark to light, and then repainted the bouquet on the third day.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how the painting is progressing and
exactly.
the mood and yeah.
I remember, you know, finishing paintings that I invested pretty much time in, and then I'd look at it at the end and I'd say, well, I'm not really excited about that, you know,
yeah.
and I was never excited about it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't know, and it's like, well, why didn't I change that in the beginning? You know, at a stage instead of continuing on with it. I like to have that latitude to make those changes at times. And
yeah, that was one of the hardest things for me with the method in New York. Is it was a very structured. You do the block in, you get the drawing perfect on a two-dimensional kind of format, and then you transfer that and you ink it.
Oh yeah.
And then you do the underpainting and then you paint over that, or you just model the form through that. And he would keep saying, keep going, and it was really fascinating. It's not bad advice.
Well,
I mean, so you would keep modeling it out, and all of a sudden you had this finished painting that was really pretty phenomenal. But it was so against all of the things inside of me that it was really hard to do that. Like, I had to force myself to, you know, you draw out the whole thing and then you start in one spot and you model through it, and that was really.
So where do you think you are now? Do you take bits of both ideas in, or?
I honestly think I'm probably on a, if it's a pendulum and I'm swinging back and forth, I'm probably closer to the Impressionist side of things, but the thing that I always am really careful not to let go is that idea of existing in the canvas. So the Impressionist ideology of maybe trying to hit just color notes like Monet, I'm not like that, but I think my paint handling is a much more, you know, Manet-esque kind of all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, you do, for sure.
Yeah.
Got a question from Paul. Says it's great to see Mike and Rick painting, but I'm curious what they're thinking ahead right now regarding remaining work. Can we hear what the artists are thinking about as being undesirable in the paintings? What is not liked? What needs to be addressed? For example, Mike would be painting that left stem, and I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just a drawing issue. I think, as I alluded to yesterday, if I'm gonna somehow turn this into something above and beyond what is kind of commonly practiced, those are the things that if I have to repaint it 6 times in order to feel comfortable with the position of the composition and where I'm going with it, like this is in the wrong spot, but I'm fine with that being in the wrong spot. I'm not going to repaint it because I actually like the way it's painted. But because this is kind of a design element, I was fiddling with it quite a bit because I was trying to figure out a placement. And still looking at it, I look up there and it looks like, I don't know, the distance now from here to here is too much of a similar thing. And so eventually I have to decide upon where that's going to go. And so those are things that you're thinking about, the form and the color and the placement, etc. But then it's also a design decision and kind of like if you like it or not, if you're excited about the way it looks as a painting. Before we started, I was kind of a little bit talking to Rick about the idea of a painting versus a study, or I think students are oftentimes in the mindset that it's constantly about this like copying phase, in the sense that they feel like they're a failure because it's not what they're seeing. And I think as artists, that goes back to the idea of like, you're being faithful, but you're going after a work of art. You're going after a feeling. So like if you were to put this in a show, you know, what are some of the things that you would make sure that happen? And that's a little bit what I do on this last day. I just try to make the things that I'm painting, I just want to be happy with the placement and whatnot.
Yeah, I'd say ditto. I mean, that's all kind of a tougher question for me to answer there, as far as just what I'm after. I don't know till I'm satisfied in what I'm looking at, and it has to do with a bit of being able to paint what I'm seeing, but what I'm seeing is what's exciting me about that. It isn't just the seeing of it. There are decisions that I'm making about that cup and how much I want to be able to see that cup, the emphasis on the flowers in the front, the emphasis in the eucalyptic type of leaves here, but also the interplay of the the snappy greens. I'm waiting on these more chromatic greens. I'm trying to tie things together, but I'm thinking and working my way towards that unified, kind of visual impulse that's really hitting me right here. And it's funny for me, I don't know. It's like, when do you know when you're finished? But do you have a answer for that? When do I know I'm done?
I kind of do. It's a weird. It's a weird sensation, because oftentimes I'll be done with the time restraint and I'm not done with the painting, so I know I didn't like it. It wasn't. But then there's times where I'm painting and I'm done. I've said everything I want to say and I still have time on the clock. So there is a moment where I feel like I'm done. Like I feel like if I keep fiddling with it, I'm going to screw it up.
Do you set paintings against the wall and come back to them ever, or do you pretty much?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I find myself doing that. I'll revisit pieces down the road a little bit further. I'll turn them against. I like to turn them away or not look at them for a while. Yeah. And then turn them back over and get a fresh eye to look at that. And then you see a lot of things that you didn't before.
So that would be, that's kind of like when I'm talking about that not done. So there's paintings that I just know are not done, or they were not successful. And they can go in storage, but I just know they're not done.
Yeah.
there was one painting I did a while back. It was quite a while now, but it was 3 figures, and it was in my storage, and it was all scratched up. And there was a panel, and my wife pulled it out, and she's like, "I love this piece," and I was like, "I don't like it," and she's like, "You have to finish it." And so then I fiddled with it for a while again, and I finished it and sent it off. It was still when I was working with Arcadia, and they sold it really quick, and people loved it. But there was something about it that I just felt that it was a failure, and I just kind of shelved it. And it took someone else's eye to come along and see it and say, "Oh, I really like this," to even consider picking it up again.
Oh, that's, oh yeah, I've definitely had that experience too. And it's like, do you hold back? You know, you want to make changes even when you're going to send it off, or somebody talked about, I don't know, I feel the same way, because, you know, if it's where you want your painting to be and be seen and be in a collection for a while, for years later to look at it, you know, it's just...
Yeah.
That's a good question, yeah.
So I've been spending a lot of time on this left side because I felt like this was painted relatively successfully, and I want your eye to come up. I always have this thing about kind of the composition. I like you to circle around. So originally I hadn't put this strong note in because I didn't know what this would look like and how it would feel. But I think putting these greens and oranges and then allowing that to kind of start to become almost the first spot that you go, and then you end up here. So once you get over here, then your eye doesn't leave, but you enter in this way. So I definitely try to kind of dictate where the viewer is going to go and where they're going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like even this could be like a trick that's like an angle that you're coming in. It's bringing you in. This dark shadow kind of pulls back.
That broken, you know, this area down here, you just gonna leave that? Is that
for now,
conscious?
Usually I leave it until I'm really decided that I don't like it. Because there's this thing with just, and it, again, you kind of saw it a lot with Richard Schmidt at the start of his, or maybe mid-career, where he left a lot of brushstrokes.
Yeah.
And I think people now just don't, when they come up to your painting and they say, "Oh, it looks like a photograph," it's because they don't have any point of reference of what a brushstroke looks like. So it's kind of just it's a way to remind people that this is a painting.
That's a good point.
And then they can kind of go up and enjoy the real quality to it.
Well, that's always the fun when you go see a piece in a museum and you see, we were talking about that the other day, just to see the real thing. It's just kind of funny because that tactile quality, it just is really something to be able to see the original. Because I remember in books, so often, we were talking yesterday, I saw Sargent's Carnation Lily Rose, and I'd seen it reproduced a lot with the kids standing there in that garden, and I you know, it's okay to me. I just never was really interested that much in it. But I never really took the time to see this, you know, the size and how big it was. And then I saw a Sargent show, turned the corner, and it was a large piece. And it just had this feeling of that twilight that he was after, and these kids here in that garden as the light was going down. And boy, it was, I mean, it was like a religious experience. I mean, it just like, you felt this hush and this, you know, this beauty of it and the way he saw it. And I think that, you know, a lot of times seeing the real thing, and part of that real thing is the texture, like you're saying.
Yeah. The size, texture,
yeah.
The actual color, because reproductions never get it right.
Yeah, you're right.
So sometimes I move my head around just to see other parts of the bouquet, because if I can't quite see some element of it, I can at least start to indicate it if I move my head a couple inches to the left, to the right, or whatever, to piece it in. And it's like over here, there's another element of orange back there that I'm trying to decide. There's orange and the dark violet pinks that are sitting back behind here.
You know, I'm going to go in with a different brush, a smaller brush, and it's a mongoose hair brush. So I'm going to be going into these flowers, start with those colors underneath first.
And I don't know if people are looking at the photo references at home, but as you look at those, just keep in mind that we're not looking at those. So, you know, if you're watching me paint and you're wondering why I haven't like gone in and made all this super crisp yet, part of it when you're painting from life is you're being selective about the things that you want the viewer to see, but also things that you're drawn to, and so then you always have to remember when you're looking at something like that, and just remember that that's not what I was being inspired by. That's an entirely different. If I would do a painting just from that photo, it would be a little bit different painting, and it would have a little bit different quality to it. And that's something that we've played around with the idea of maybe doing, if I do a class in the future of floral painting from a photo, so you can see kind of, they're just two different things and you react different to them.
I think that goes for anything from, I think, when you see things in nature, like you're saying, moving your head around and seeing just little different angles and colors, and the selection process, the application of the paint is totally different. I mean, there's no comparison for me. And people always ask me about that, you know, as far as comparing it to a photo. And I think I said that before. I think I've destroyed more work using a photo than I have helping a piece of work. So, yeah, and I don't know if, so they have the exact picture? Is that what you said?
Yeah, they have pictures, but, you know, that was taken Thursday night, so my bouquet looks quite different from Thursday night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, has it, yeah, I was going to ask you that, I meant to. Yeah, how has it changed? The rose?
I mean, for the most part, a lot of the elements are the same. The dolly has gotten smaller and not as full. The rose underneath is kind of opened up. So now this white area is bigger than this dark red. It's switched. This has fallen over. This has opened up a little bit. But those are all things that each day I look at. I sit down today and I say, okay, what can I pull from the setup? And when I sat down this morning, I just noticed that a lot of this stuff just looked really interesting. So it not only plays into the idea of the composition, but it was alive, it was solid, and there's no reason to. So over here, this stuff is drooped down and fallen and kind of wilted.
Oh yeah. Oh
and
my.
So yeah.
And I didn't even look at that. That has.
So then I just focus on the parts that are still kind of doing well and paint those. So it definitely dictates kind of how this painting evolves. If this were really fresh still, and that's what I think like in the photo it is, I probably would be incorporating a lot more elements of the composition up towards this way, because my eye would be going there. But because it's fallen down and I can no longer see those nice movements up that way, that would be a photo thing or it would be something that I would have had to capture the first day, or I could make it up.
Do you find that, I mean, that, so you're willing to work around that, and that's why I began and I talk about working fast and with, because I find that very thing to me is you know, like I stopped that first one I did the first day because the leaves were so dead already, and I just lost interest in that, and I have a hard time unless the thing is there to look at, and that's why I try to go as much as I can, finish it off as far as I can, as fast as I can, you know, and that's, and what I get, and
I mean, if it had faded and wilted the first day, that would have been tough, I think. So I think that's a just feeling. But for the most part, I try to allow the process. I allow room for that and say that
really,
most definitely, because I've never worried about the flowers fading in workshops, and it's really tough because the students, they're frustrated because the flowers are gone or they're wilted and changed, and I sit down and I point out really beautiful parts of the bouquet that they could still paint, that are still accessible, and to be inspired by that. So I think, you know, 2-3 more days on this bouquet, I could probably start to keep, you know, finding stuff that was valuable.
Really? Wow.
But you notice how slow I'm going, and I'm not repainting it, so I'm not being re-inspired by the whole thing. I'm just being selective about the things that I think would maybe help this.
That might be a little bit more of a difference, I think, between us,
sure.
For sure. Because I need to look at that, and if it doesn't reignite me, I have a hard time going back. You know, and I'm trying to find. I know people try to substitute a different flower and put it in there, and I've tried that. That's is not the best for me either. If I don't get it, I don't get it, and it's like this. The quicker I could grab hold. Like the way we're doing the live stream with the timing is not the way I would paint, you know, normally. So it's like, you know, this interruption, like taking it and then going with it where it was. I would have gone further, I think, yesterday to take my. I talked about the morning and the afternoon session. I take a break there in the afternoon, in the morning to the afternoon, and I have a fresh eye in the morning again to see it. And usually I can hold it. What I'll do a lot too is just on flowers, just with that point, since we're talking about is, have you ever tried to paint in really cold rooms? You know, do you ever? I turn my air conditioner. I do a lot of those peonies. So I would turn my air, and I remember turning my air way down to the point I had to put on bibs and all. I was like, you know, and that type of thing, just to keep it like it was painting in a walk-in refrigerator, you know, just to maintain that. Fresh. And I did that for quite a while. I used to do that early. I remember when I had my studio, it was a smaller room, I could do that. And I come out like an icicle with a.
Oh, that's great, because I was just going to ask for the audience, like, usually when they hear that, they say, well, what, like right before you explain the whole fridge thing, they think, well, how can I keep it from changing? That without using a photo. So if you do want to try to push on and paint from life, how do you keep it from changing? And so that could be.
That's a valid way of doing it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a fun.
You're
fact,
laughing with me, right?
I don't know if I would do it myself.
Okay. Well, it was an experiment for a while. I haven't done that recently because now my studio is a lot bigger and I can't do it that way. But I still have the old one. I could still do that, come and think of it. But the other thing about maintaining your bouquet at the end of the day, you know, you just left yours here. I took it to another part of the house that I felt was a little bit more air conditioned and cooler. And I did that purposefully. And what I think about and what I do a lot is I take actually a Coleman cooler and ice in there, and then I turn it on its side. so it's tall, and then I can put my bouquet right in there, close the door
That's
overnight, and keep it that way. You know, putting your bouquet in the refrigerator is not the best because there's other items of fruits and all. It's probably online, I'm sure, all that information about the gases and what that could do.
That was the first time I'd heard that. But to keep it away from the citrus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an influence from that happening, but I think that's a particular thing. I mean, you know, and I've always known this about you. You are a person that you work from a lot of your imagination too. I believe, is that right?
Yeah.
I think that what you were talking about as far as feeling that form and inventing a space and all that, and I tend to be a lot more tuned to the visual, and so I'm more inclined to want to preserve whatever I can.
So just so the audience is aware, that was kind of the idea of the benefit of hearing two different mentalities and two different ideas is that goes back to the Impressionists and academic traditions.
Yes,
the Impressionists were very interested in capturing that fleeting effect of light, and they would go to great extent to do that. And I think the Academy was always a little bit more comfortable just hunkering down in the studio and reinventing a scene and using what they could to aid them in that kind of discovery. So you think of Alma Tadema or Jerome, and they use these, you know, photographic references, little black and white references of some architectural elements of ancient Greece or whatever. You know, it's so that that requires a lot of inventing, and it's a totally different mindset.
It is, and I think about, you know, sometimes you're inventing a lot. I think we talked about Bierstadt and those grand paintings that he did and all that. But then you know, going back to Carnation Lily Rose, if I'm not mistaken, that was painstakingly done over a multitude of
He would only work for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
15 to 30 minutes, and he did it for like 2 years or so, two summers or something like that, where it was the twilight kind of. Yeah.
So I would say he leaned a little bit more that way, but you know, I think he was a pretty visual painter like that. I saw, you know, you think about Sorolla. I've seen pictures of him with his large canvases at the beach staked down, and you know, all, you know, tents that he would construct actually to be able to get himself shade and whatever. So he was on location, and it's whatever, you know, I think triggers that in you. I mean, there's no real right, there's no wrong, but I think that's very interesting. That's a good point. I'm trying not to talk to myself because I realize now that I would normally be talking to myself. And
well, the good thing here is you have an audience where you can talk.
What's he whispering? Yeah. Well, I again, I don't know, that maybe I've read about Sargent a lot, but I remember people who had sat for portraits with him would talk about the fact that he had a cigarette in his mouth. He'd be working there, and then he'd be saying things like buggers, I don't know why I think of the British, you know, maybe, I don't know if that's a, is that a British? Buggers.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
I like how Simi says bloody. Bloody all the time. Is that a particular Yorkshire thing?
No, that's a very
English, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. She uses it a lot.
What is it, bloody?
Bloody.
Bloody or bloody hell.
Yeah, right. Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a tamer's way of it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think that point you made about moving around, for those individuals that are working kind of site-size and looking the way I tend to work, I do not mind drifting, because if I find something more interesting at a different angle, I definitely will allow myself the liberty of putting that down.
Rick, I just thought of something with a lot of people in the workshops ask me if I step back, and so going back to the idea of the reduction glass.
Oh yeah.
If I've done it right, I should be able to hold up the reduction glass, and my painting should read like,
Yes.
it should read well in the reduction. And so
Yes.
in other words, like, the reason why I don't step back is because if I do step back, I think it'll look pretty good, just as good as it looks up close. So does that make sense? So it's like almost like a test of if you're nailing the values right according to the light source. So going back to the idea about yesterday, how I have everything here organized and I put it there. If I have the scale organized properly here, it should read right from across the room.
One would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you know, I think there's a deception when you're close to something that you may not notice. You may not see something
Right.
up close that becomes a lot more obvious when you stand back.
It's like why Da Vinci used the mirror so much. I mean, if
Yeah.
he's a genius and he used it, I mean, it's definitely.
As you speak, I am going to do this. Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you for the yeah. I don't know. I see a big difference there. I remember that was one of the first purchases Richard Lack made in his studio, was a mirror, I remember. And we actually had the mirror, you know, he would have the mirror set behind him so that while he'd paint, then he'd turn around and he'd look in the mirror and see that image and that stroke. Every time he put a stroke down, so he'd see the entire field. And you know, that's something to contemplate. I think that, like I say, I put the big thing in the contextualizing of the whole thing. You know, I just was trained that way, and I stay with that.
Yeah.
And
Well, to make you feel better, I think most people do. I think the reason why I don't is because, well, but it's not true, because Jacob used the mirror all the time. I think it was more the idea that if you were doing it right, it should read right.
Well, that's true. Yeah, but you don't know. See, my retort would be, do you know you're doing it right? And that would tell you. I mean, you know, if it looked good, you looked at it through the reduction, you liked what you had. And
I only looked at that through the reduction. But
Oh,
what
you
I
didn't
was
look at
saying is, if I looked at this, you can also do it to your painting.
Well,
It's like,
do you want to do that?
that's
I mean,
it.
just.
I mean,
Yeah, if you look through that and keep that at the same size, then you would see things that.
So I always think, I mean,
you don't see.
I think it looks kind of better smaller.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's good. Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that it should read right like that. I'm saying like a punch and an emphasis on something, and you do have a good command. You know, like if you had overstated the value of this, it would read too. It would pop out. Right. And you may not notice that because you get involved in all the reflected light, and that's what happens a lot of times. That people get involved in all the intricacies, and then the edges, and then all the petals, and they have all the petals drawn and the separation between them, and there's lines. And then when you stand back, the whole thing is either too bright, you know, and it isn't pushed back, and you miss that because you weren't thinking of the context, and that's the danger of it, and that's why I think this is valuable.
One thing that I think was a temptation when I was a student in Minnesota was a temptation to paint it because it was there.
Yeah.
So, like something like this, for instance, this kind of brushwork, like I've selectively left that because I just, like if I were to focus and actually hit the light notes that were occurring there, that would be a part of the composition that I'm not quite sure I want it to be that bright.
Yes.
But here I chose that I actually do kind of like to have that.
That's a really good point. You're selectively.
I'm being super selective just to decide, because then once this is taken down and whoever owns this, all they see is the decisions that I was making. So it's filtered through my experience of, look at it as, I view it as translation. Yeah. I'm translating the true document into a document that people can enjoy. That's kind of how I think of it.
I would concur. The only thing I see, you're making these live while you're doing it. The way I edit is oftentimes, like I say, I turn it against the wall, and a week later, then I may say that's just fighting this, and so I'll reduce it at that point. And that's why I mentioned about a picture. Sometimes I'll look at that and I'll say, yeah, that's the way it was, but I don't like it. And then I make edits like that and changes. And
that's happened too. I've felt satisfied with something, and then I go to take a picture of it to post on a public forum, and I realize, well, I don't want people to see it that way.
Yeah,
I'm not ready. And then I go and switch something, and then I'll be ready to let it go. Sometimes if you have the public pressure of eyes on your work, you see something that you may not have seen any other way.
That's, you bring up a very good point, because that has been in my lifetime a big change. Because it always used to be, you could talk to people, what you've been doing and all, and they come over to the studio and see it. But now you feel compelled to have to justify that I've been working on stuff, I've been out there, I've done this, and I've been painting here. But then it's like, can we see what you're doing? If you don't post a picture and all that, and want it out, you're just not sure. You're maybe as for me, I do so many paintings, and sometimes I definitely have a lot of paintings going, and especially during peony season, I try different ways of doing this. As far as just I tried just staying with 2 or 3 paintings, during that season, and really try to render them through. But then I felt like I missed so many of the flowers, so then I thought, well, what I'll do is little studies, and make, like you were saying, small paintings, 5x7, 8x10s of these different compositions, and then blow them up. Okay. Well, that didn't work for me at all, because unless I'm doing it from life in the beginning, there's, like I was saying, there's a totally different way you approach it. So then what I've done now, and what I've been doing, is I paint, and I'll get maybe about 8 paintings done during that season. Okay. And then out of that, I'll have 5 that I really want to take a little bit further, you know, and it may go further in those days because I have more time. And then out of that, I'll have some that I'll modify, you know, and change and do little, like I was saying, remove things and maybe darken the background and do some changes like that. But it's that process there. But everything, you know, percentage-wise, I would say the heavy percentage is the things from life. And my wife would be the first one that would tell you that she always encourages me to paint from life, you know, just and leave it, because
Yeah.
the moment I go in the studio, my time, actually I spend probably at least 2-3 times the amount of time just, I call it ditzing with my painting, you know, and rather than making more impulsive decisions. And I think for me, it works better and I feel better when I render it right in the field like that. But that edit process that you were talking about is something I do, and it's done. I do that edit process, but very minimally and at the end there. I asked Joe this morning, does it feel like the beginning of a new week to you? Sunday, do you think of Sunday as Sunday morning, the end of a week or the beginning of a new week? That's totally different, but...
I think of it as the end.
Yeah, I think... That's
You think of it as
Joe
the
and
beginning?
No, I never think of it as. I think our calendars have been trying to force that, and I never feel that way.
But you feel it's the beginning of the week?
No.
The end.
At the end of the week.
Okay.
But the calendars always are, you know. And,
Oh, it's, yeah, Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah,
But it's not.
all right.
that's not right. Buggers.
Buggers. Oh, you had talked about using the same color in different spots.
Oh, yeah.
I will do that if it's the same form. So, like, for instance, I'm mixing up the background, right? And I have the background note. And so that form behind the vase hasn't changed. So that plane back there goes all the way over here, goes back there, continues over here. So that plane is the same plane that goes behind the vase.
Right, right.
So that's where I would use it.
Okay.
And so now that this is tipping up and facing a little bit more of the light, I would use the same note here, and I would go right up to the edge of the vase, and then it keeps going over here. So but that's more spatial.
The thing I would, yeah, it's funny because I would say caution to something like that because, you know, the relationship, you know, because of your simultaneous contrast between that and all that. But it works effectively because actually this makes this brighter and gives it more air below than this note here, which kind of flows around. So, and that's really good in bouquets. But you think about a building, you could, like a sky going behind a skyscraper. It's the same sky behind, but then you adjust it because of the brick face would interfere with that color. Outdoors, I know sometimes you really gotta adjust that type of note there. In a bouquet, this works out well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have these purpley flowers, or I don't know what those are. But I'm just gonna try to get them. But they're all the same. Yeah, I'm seeing these tones are appearing all over, and so I'm just kind of floating them in different spots, and then I'm checking the value and kind of their color for now. They're kind of like a purpley or kind of tone here. But I don't want to get too purple. It's amazing, even these grays that are very gray, they're so close, color can interrupt. That's the thing about flowers too, I think, is, and I think you and I are similar in a sense of having that penchant for wanting something less chromatic. There are artists, and we talked about people that are very successful having a lot of color, but I've had better success for myself to be able to keep my colors restrained. So my family always makes comments about the fact that my garden, even outside, is mainly boring, and they
all these whites. And
muted tones, and I love that. And then it was actually my son who went out there and planted a lot more chromatic. He was always into wanting me to get dahlias, and we talked about dahlias. I've set up to paint, and I've painted dahlias on location, but boy, to me they're so brilliant, so busy. I have a hard time controlling them. And then again, this is a Sargent. I remember reading about Sargent, perhaps you know this, that he went out with a group of artists, really established artists, and they went out to paint poppies in a field. And it reads that one by one, they all just kind of gave up. And Sargent was the last out there till finally he succumbed and said, that he lost the battle. Yeah. And, went in, trying to get that it's hard to do, when you have something that bright, and flowers are that way, so. So no comments, huh? All right. Just curious, how are we on time?
It's just going to 20 past 11.
Okay,
so you're almost halfway through.
Oh, okay. Oh, we are. Okay. Ooh, all right. Past 11. Yeah, I'm going to keep referring back.
We've got a question from Annette Yuga. She said, this live stream has been fantastic. I thought this might clear up for me what kind of painter I am or aspire to be, but both approaches are so appealing that I still don't quite know. Could you talk a little about the learning process? What practices in your earlier stages really moved you forward in your learning trajectory? Also, could you talk about continuing education in terms of what your students have on the horizon? What you would recommend if someone was limited to online learning and wanted to really have a focused study?
So Rick, you can talk about your formation. And then
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My grounds. I actually after college studies, where I don't want to be harsh, but I really didn't learn anything much about painting in my college days. You know, when I went to college, the application of paint and the way to paint. And so I started trying to do things on my own, and it wasn't until I got to the atelier that grounded me in what I know today about painting. So there is plenty of ateliers now that are located in various parts of this country here that would be excellent. And basically the instruction there would be to train yourself in the draftsmanship and values, you know, as a basis. And I think that's so important because, you know, you've got to be able to judge values and get them in the right place. And that's something you can, if you don't have the time or the ability to be able to do that, it's finding objects and reducing it down into black and white renditions. But you really would need the understanding, someone to help you with being able to make sure you're understanding the difference between light and shadow. Maybe I'm getting too deep, but the ateliers would be really good. You know, online, I'm not really a person that goes online and looks at things. I know there's a lot of good artists that are out there. I've tried to watch things online, and I haven't liked a lot of things. Maybe I've gone to the wrong places, but I think you can get a lot of wrong instruction online. So I would be saying the ateliers would be a good one, or someone that you really enjoy their style of painting, and find out what they do. A lot of artists today are posting a series of steps that they use to get to a certain place, you know, and if you don't have the chance to be able to study with them, or if they don't post how they do it, that would be something. I sometimes watch people's incremental studies. That might be good. But I don't think that was a really good answer.
No, I think it was good. I think it depends on where you're at in life and what you're able to, how much time you're able to invest in it. Right. As far as the atelier kind of environment, that's oftentimes full-time, so that's not accessible for a lot of people because it's they're working, or they're just not able to. They may have kids or something. They can't move to a place where there's a good atelier. So if you can do any of that, like originally I left Minneapolis to go study with Jacob because I liked his work and I wanted to study with him. You know, that was the thing that I was after, is I really looked at the artist's work and tried to pursue it. So as far as what we're trying to offer here is this whole idea of Atelier Live. Is an atelier is essentially it's a workshop in French. You know, it's an environment where. Yeah. And so I figured the more we can go live, the better for people, because then it opens up. I grew up in the Midwest in North Dakota. I didn't have access to stuff growing up as a kid, so I always remember what it's like to not be in New York or to not be in LA. Or you know, skateboarding as a kid, I wanted to be in California. So if we can bring something to people in, you know, Ireland or Iceland and Australia that they can't get in their country, that's really the heart behind this. But you know, books, I think that's, like I said, Alex was kind of self-taught. He looked at books all the time and thinking of books as like old master copies, that kind of thing. You know, try to draw anything and everything. Stephen Sale one time said, when I was the one time I've actually hung out with him in his studio, he was talking to a group of students from the New York Academy, and he was telling them to draw everything and to just draw all the time, because it's such an important part of art and picture making. And so he said stop getting used to like taking photos and just draw all the time, because it'll really help your art. So whether you pursue an academic you know, formation or impressionist, you just kind of, you seek out whatever advice you can get, and then you pick and choose what you like. I tell students at the beginning of a workshop, if you can walk away with one thing, you've learned something special. You know, that's if it's one thing, it's one thing, and it can be life-changing. I only saw Richard Schmid paint one time in person, and it totally changed the way I mix paint. You know, just seeing him do it one time in person was enough to like transform the way I mix paint. So it was. And that wasn't a class, it was just an opportunity, but that's kind of what we're trying to offer, you know, this kind of conversation between two professional artists. A lot of people don't have access to it, so that's what we're trying to open up through internet, the idea that, you know, not everyone does it the same, you don't have to do it the same. So that's kind of my thought behind that.
Well, if I could just jump in again, yes, I feel bad because I think what we were...
Did you lose the feed?
You kind of go,
Did it glitch again?
the computer froze and that's that.
What?
We got the spinning wheel.
That's weird.
Really? Wow.
Well, technology is a blessing. And
Y'all are still live.
You are still live.
oh, we are?
Oh,
Okay, great.
Again? Oh, good.
And we're just, the only thing we have right now is a shot of Rick's palette.
Oh, really? Start mixing something.
Yeah.
I'm teasing.
Painting on your palette.
So you're stuck there on my
Stuck
palette?
on the palette. Start talking about color.
Can they hear us?
Yeah, we're still live, I think,
Oh,
but it's just
okay.
froze.
Well, did you want to say we're experiencing technical difficulty, right? Is that it? You know, if I could just say something more about that point, can I talk about that?
Yeah.
I feel bad in a way because I think what you're doing here with this type of training is excellent. And it was funny because as we sat around at breakfast, we were talking about that very thing. What would be some ways to be able to make this not only accessible, but to meet people where they are, so it isn't something that's at a level that's too high or too low, you know, because everybody's at different levels and all that. And how to make it, you know, we talked about even doing it at a consistent time frame, maybe on a weekly basis at a certain time. But what I would encourage would be people to communicate and get their ideas in, maybe what they'd like to see. I would help on the outside because, you know, the one thing coming here for me from the outside has been, this has really been a revelation for me. You know, I can honestly say that. I think what these guys are doing here is just incredible. And there's a lot of effort that goes into doing this and a lot of thinking as far as how to make it so that it meets those needs. So there's an opportunity for that person that asked that question to really stay tuned here because you know what your breadth of what you're doing and the plans for the future are incredible. I think this is probably one of the best times if you want to learn. You're going to have a really good platform to learn. So I'm very impressed.
Thanks, Rick.
Very much.
Well, ideally, and she'd asked about what East Oaks may do, and just the more the merrier. I guess that's the whole goal, is to be able to do it more often and have more instructors, and that's really what we're shooting for. We have lots of ideas in the works, but it's just a matter of creating that team and making it happen. That is really the part that we're a small business, we're growing. It requires manpower, and so by all of your support and everyone joining, that's nice, because that allows us to keep dreaming and thinking about other ideas that we can offer you that are more affordable and more frequent, actually. So.
Yep.
How are we doing on the feed?
We'll have to refresh the computer because it's not opening the app.
Still on Rick's palette.
Oh,
We
really?
can't open the app, so we can't edit.
Wow.
I'm going to refresh the computer. Keep going.
Okay.
Just keep thinking on YouTube.
Well, to speak into the technical difficulties that we're experiencing, it's one of the things that I think other companies have shied away from, is going live is a tricky thing, because it's never a rock solid. I mean, majority of the time we're having good feeds, and the stream never breaks, and the technology now that's available is making it pretty reliable. It's just sometimes, like with anything, if your phone glitches or your computer stops and it happens while we're live, then it's an inconvenience mainly to the viewers who are watching live. But if you're used to our platform and you're rewatching it, you can just scroll through the bar and just skip ahead where the feed is back to normal. So we apologize for that, just the inconvenience of this happening, but it's as far as we know, it's just currently a part of the risk of doing this.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Right?
Yeah.
You get a little bit of all of it. Yeah.
Because before it was not possible to broadcast with a high def stream of video unless you had just an insane amount of investment in the production equipment to go live. It was really it was only for broadcasting, and it's gotten to the point where small businesses like us can go live and have the quality of the production level of something you would see on TV, but then it comes with the challenges and risks of you're working with things that are liable to potentially kind of freeze on you.
Everybody's left. It's just you and me. I don't know.
Let's see
Where's
what
the
people are
crew?
emailing.
Yeah.
Could you each talk about, let's see, that's good. So it must still have a live feed. So.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, that's an old question.
It is?
I don't know if we're still alive or not, I don't know where this has gone. So.
Okay. Barbara Clark asked. Could you each talk about how you finish painting once completed? Thanks. So maybe she's meaning like the varnish.
Oh, yeah.
Could you each talk about how you finish a painting once completed?
Yeah, I
It's
assume
probably
they
like a
mean
varnish.
varnishing,
Yeah.
and I use Solubar on mine, and it's
It's a synthetic varnish from
Yeah.
from which is the company?
you know, I don't know. I haven't mixed into one of those jars, mason jars. So what I do is I take it comes in matte and gloss,
Mm.
and what I do then is I mix proportions of the matte and gloss, and I put a little bit of a terp or solvent in there, just a little bit, and then I have a ratio that I use, and then I apply
Okay.
that to the surface.
Great.
You-
I just use a Gambar synthetic varnish. Once it's dry to the touch, I just put a solid layer on,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Do you spray or do you
I use a brush. Yeah.
brush? Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Synthetic soft hair
Yeah. Okay.
brush. So Ellen Brandon from California says, "Good morning from California. Love what you're doing. Keep doing it."
What time was that set? Is that of interest, Michael?
11:35.
Oh, okay, so she was still at the peak.
Yeah, I think it's just stuck on Rick's palette potentially.
Oh, is that right?
But I think I think it's still, yeah.
Wow. I feel.
I feel like you got some airtime on your palette there, Rick. Maybe you should start talking about something.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about my palette. You know, one thing I will say that
Yeah.
I don't know if I said is this bead of white that I
You
do.
did. You talked.
Oh,
about
I
it,
did
yeah.
talk about
What
it.
about
Never
the
mind.
lead white? Have you tried it yet?
Oh, I did use a little bit of lead white. This is another new
Yeah.
addition here. Mike was kind enough to give me some of his stacked white.
Yeah, stack lead white. Yeah.
Stacked lead white, and I did find it. I'm kind of saving it a bit to more towards the end where I
Okay,
want to
right.
hit some of these notes
Right.
on the outside here.
Yeah.
But I tell you, there's a big difference in the whites. You know,
Yeah.
when you're trying
Yeah.
different whites, undoubtedly, you know, there's a big difference. And one of the things is the stiffness and consistency of the white. I think that you get some whites that are more stringy or soft, you know, that are easy in their application, others that are stiffer, you know, along the way there.
Right,
And
right.
I used to prefer the stiffer whites, but now I've moved more towards a stringier or
Yeah.
a softer one. But this again is stiffer, you know, so that.
Yeah, it's very dense.
Yeah, it's nice though. I think
Yeah.
for palette, and I will in the end, use a little bit of
Yeah.
palette knife and
Okay.
all that
Yeah.
because I like to apply some things at the end to be able to get some harder lips on
That's
the
great.
end of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
So we got another question from Blake. He says, "Do you find that getting the outside shape or profile of a flower the most important part of bringing a flower into reality?"
definitely, I feel
Yeah,
there's a
okay.
big each like we talk. Maybe I didn't talk to you about it. But as far as every object in life, I think has a different silhouette or a different form that you're really trying to hold on to. You don't want to lose. And I think we were talking about the male-female forms too. That
yeah.
one thing about flowers is that I've noticed that that Mike and I were talking about the fact of having a lot of straight lines, a lot of more strength and dominant. I think about more towards this, male characteristics for some reason. For me, I think in that term. But as compared to rounded forms, if you get too much roundness in there, it becomes too Pillsbury doughish.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen that when I've been teaching classes and working with people that propensity towards having rounder forms, even on the leaves and the way they curve in. The leaves and a lot of things are constructed of a lot of straight lines that round, and I think that's important to be able to see things that way.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer? I forget what the question was.
The basically talking about in Minnesota they use the word a lot, arabesque, and the
Yes.
idea of the linear outside shape.
That's it.
Yeah, I think you just have to be careful that you don't cut it out too much and it become pasted on. That's just the one drawback to thinking too much in a linear mindset.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
It's almost
Yes.
like if there's a similar thing that happens if there's no brushwork and it's too smooth. I feel like maybe there's a quality to it that is a little bit too soft and fuzzy, that you need some brushwork and hard edges. And
How are we doing now? We're
We're doing really well.
Oh, okay. Okay. All is well. All right. I don't know.
No, we never actually lost the feed. It's all fine. We had to just restart the computer. It all frozen us. So everyone.
So the visual.
See you and see you and everything.
Oh.
Nothing actually.
was it stuck on the palette though?
It was stuck on the palette, yeah, but I can still hear you talking. We never actually lost the feed anymore.
Okay, good.
Got a question from Leslie asking about varnish. So I've read you have to wait 6 months before varnishing. Have you encountered any problem varnishing soon after your painting dries?
Mm-hmm.
I have not, and I guess I don't do any scientific judging of that, but I know that the thinner I paint something, the earlier I could do it. I mean, if I'm waiting on something thicker, and what I do a lot of times, and if it goes to a person's home, I'll put a note on the back, and then I'll tell them that this date to call me. It's like an expiration date, and then I go over to their place and just apply that varnish.
So the whole idea of the 6 months is it takes oil paint 6 months to a year for it to dry thoroughly, all the way through. And the reason why they tell you to wait 6 months is if you use a real varnish. So if you use the Damar, it will actually chemically bind to the paint layer. And so then in 100 years, if they try to clean it, it's harder to remove the varnish and clean it without taking that last paint layer that you've put on. But the synthetics are really nice because the synthetics are made of a different component, and they rest on top of the oil that is in your oil paints, so then the synthetics can go on quicker and be taken off easier. So that's kind of you can put a layer of real varnish on a painting, it'll just start to bind to the actual painting, and it's harder to get off. I think that's the kind of reason why they recommend that.
That's good. Good answer.
You covered all the questions in Mark, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ask the one from Marianne about the background? Because I didn't. But I had it ready. I'll ask you here.
Yeah.
She was asking, do you look for your background colour appearing in the areas of the foliage, flowers, or vase? What is the new chromatic green Rick squeezed on the palette?
Ah, yeah.
Rick.
Snuck it in again. Is that look? Boy, I even found out. You know, I knew this was going to happen because I didn't put that on my materials list, and it isn't on there a lot. And it's actually, if I'm doing portraits or sometimes florals, I'll put this green because it usually isn't there for me. And what it is cadmium green light. Let me see. I don't even know. It's a Winsor Newton. Here it is. Cadmium green pale. Cadmium green pale. And you know, I mentioned this the first time through that I don't a lot of times use a lot of all my colors. Like you could see, I hardly touch these here, and really very little of the purple. And I tend to migrate towards certain colors. But when I saw this yesterday and began on this and away from that, I noticed that I wanted to be able to get some real snappy greens. Now, it wasn't necessary, and that's how I should make that point, is I have a cadmium lemon here, and I probably could have mixed something really close with this green or my blue, you know, be able to get that kind of color. But it's a convenience. And I did put that down because right now I'm starting to use that myself here, and that's cadmium. The short answer is cadmium yellow, green pale, you know. And I've been busted. You're busted. Yeah. That's very good. So it has been on my palette for a while. So somebody noticed it was frozen on my palette. That wasn't the place to freeze it. So people, aha.
Yep.
Another question, they're all coming in thick and fast now. Would you please comment on the absorption of different grounds? Having seen others work with acrylic grounds where it stains the canvas and cannot really be completely wiped out, I assume that acrylic is very absorbent. They use triple oil primed linen, but Michael commented that lead priming really absorbs the oil.
Mm-hmm.
Please comment on the benefits and difference of lead versus oil priming. Why he likes the more absorbent.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually hand that over to you.
Yeah. That's a tough question. I don't have a clear answer for it, but what I can say is lead grounds are more flexible. So going back to the idea of a substrate. So if you have something that doesn't allow moisture to get in, then it doesn't flex as much, and it's so the metal ground with the really flexible lead paint on top is a good combination because the ground is super solid and the lead is flexible, so it doesn't ever crack. So this should never crack. As far as absorbing, that's almost as it varies as much from canvas to canvas and ground to ground. And you know, if you're using oil-based ground or a lead, I don't know what the manufacturers put into it, and that's one of the things that you go incorporating depending on what is actually happening. So let's say I do a oil on paper, right, with a PVA size.
Okay.
I'm going to use a lot more terp or Gamsol because it's just a different kind of surface. And so I always continually adjust depending on what effect I'm going for. So if you notice that if you're painting on glass, then you know you can use pretty solid paint and you don't have to worry so much about it absorbing because it's not going to absorb at all. And so it's almost like asking which, so if you look at my palette here, like, you know, asking which color I use, and I have, you know, literally hundreds of little mixes.
Yeah.
And so the variables are so slight that you just go depending on what you're actually working on. And then of course you get comfortable with one and you get used to it, and then that becomes your method. But it's really more about understanding if it's absorbing something in that material is sucking in the oil of your paint. And so there's more room for it to absorb into. So a canvas with a lead ground, there's more room for things to absorb into because you have the linen of the canvas. Here I just have the lead and then the metal. So the only thing it's absorbing into is the lead. So there's a very fine, you know, layer of. And in this particular case, the reason why it may be absorbing more is because I had a painting underneath. So some of that dry paint from before that I put the oil ground over top of is also absorbing. And so it's creating a little bit of a. So it just depends on how you prepare it and what you use.
I never thought, you know, when you were saying that, I was thinking about using a cotton canvas.
Yeah.
Cotton might be more absorbed.
Most definitely.
Yes, yeah. So it's like Viva paper towels or something, and so that with acrylic would be more.
I don't know.
Okay, acrylic, because you have a lot of acrylic gessos out there, and
Yeah.
And I would think there's kind of a component of chalkiness to me
Yeah.
with acrylic. It's kind of, you can, if you're sanding it, it's dusty and all that. So I would say that it's got a lot of absorption. So
Sure.
that combination, it just enhances that. So you get a lot of paintings that kind of get blotchy and get sucked into the canvas. So there's the unevenness, and certain oil paints have a lot more oil mixed in with the pigment, so that those can kind of be especially prone to losing that.
And a little bit of a rule of thumb with that is if it's absorbing, use more oil. People tend to think that they have to let it dry and use retouch varnish, but actually the retouch varnish has a resin in it, if I understand properly, that it can create cracking. So if you use more oil, then your painting will stay on the surface. That's why I went around at the beginning and I was oiling out with just the oil, because I actually want the oil. It's the light it's the light bouncing off the surface. The analogy that George O'Hanlon used is if you put water on cement, it becomes darker. It's because the light is bouncing off it different. It's not scattering as much. If it scatters more, it becomes more matte.
Yes.
And so if you put more oil in the surface, what happens is it starts to even out the microscopic surface layer.
Right.
And the light bounces off of it different, and it becomes more vivid.
Right.
So it's a lot of like allowing the oil to build up on your painting in such a way that it, and if you're worried about it yellowing, you can use walnut oil, and then you won't have an issue with that.
Would you recommend one oil over another? I was just going to ask.
I use normal oleogel, and I think that's linseed oil, so I'm not overly concerned about it, but that's just my own. It's just as easy to purchase walnut oil. I mean, you know, tomorrow I should make the switch. It's one of those things that you just, you can be as archival as you really want to be in.
Okay, I thought that was a very good answer. Good job. Yeah, there's a lot in they call that the refractive index. I remember when I was, researching and looking at colors, that became a big factor. That refractive index. It's the same reason why a watercolorist, when you put the wash down, it looks a lot darker. And then suddenly, watercolorists know that it always dries lighter. And it's that reason you were saying about that, because of the bumpiness of the paper and that refractive index. When you reduce that refractive index with the water level, it allows that light rays to pass through evenly and then bounce out and be able to go to your eye, so it looks more brilliant. As those pigments sink in and the water is absorbed into the paper and it evaporates, it deposits the pigments, and now they're within the fibers of the paper, and the light bouncing off of that surface scatters, and it becomes apparently a lot lighter. So it's all to do with the refractive index of the water floating over and the pigments inside. So watercolorists know that will be lightening up, but that's the same effect about the painting. That's very good. When you're saying that, that's very good.
I've got a question for Michael. When you're working with live flowers, which are opening, sometimes tangents are created. Could you speak about object tangents and how they affect the three-dimensional quality you're trying to create in a painting? For example, the rose and the rosebud on the left.
That one? Yeah. Well, they're good to avoid. So as I was fiddling around with that, I was contemplating putting a little dot of pink on the other side, but the reason why I didn't is I just felt like, I don't know, that may call more attention to it, but I think it's a good idea to constantly be looking for those things. And I think also from the experience that I've had watching other people paint, oftentimes something like that it's very apparent on camera, and it almost drives you crazy while you're watching it. Like when I edited my first video, in Argentina there was a passage where I was modeling through a pot, and it was a clay pot, and I swear I took forever, and there was this little dot that I hadn't touched yet. when I was painting it, I had no clue I was doing it, but it was like at the very end, I couldn't make the cut until I covered that stupid dot. And finally, I don't know, I did something and I mixed that and I just covered it, and then I finally faded to black, and I was like, oh, that was brutal. So I think like if you're sitting at home wondering why I've left that tangent, I was in my mind, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I hadn't fully decided yet. So that's a good eye. I think it's best to not let that happen. So as your great example would be tomorrow, most likely this would probably droop a little bit more. That would be an opportunity to revisit exactly where I want to put this thing. And so that's the advantage, to kind of allowing your bouquet to do what it does and try to follow along. One phrase that Antonio Lopez, I've either seen it in a book or heard from a friend or something, or maybe he said it, I've met him once, but the point is that he talks about following nature, and so he's very faithful to nature, but he follows it, and so he works like 2 or 3 years or more on the same painting.
Whoa!
Yeah, he'll just
How
keep.
big are they?
They're big, but he also, like that garden piece I showed you.
Yeah.
I think that was dated. He sometimes puts like 88 to 94 or something. So like he literally dates like.
Wow.
Yeah. So he'll just keep returning to it, and I was just in the Cork Museum, and I saw that Innes had a similar thing. He painted on this landscape that he did for a period of like 3 or 4 years, which I thought was surprising.
Yeah, well, Innes did a lot in the studio. I mean, most of his work was done in the studio, right?
I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Most likely, but I bet it was a little bit of a blend of the memory thing, where he would go out and experience something.
Right.
And somehow capture a note of it or something. He would write about it, and then go back and try to.
Interesting. Okay. But in the studio, probably that he'd be applying the paint and doing that, and well, he was into that Swedish organism or something like that, right? I mean, it was like a religious experience for him.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know much about him.
Oh, okay.
A question about sanding for Michael.
Yeah.
Is there a concern when sanding with lead white on the canvas? Do you use a protective mask?
Again, that's one of those things where so my suspicion, the reason why you're asking, is that you're very cautious about that kind of thing, and I think it's important that you protect yourself as much as you can. And I think for every artist there's a sliding scale of how much they protect themselves from deadly chemicals, and some artists would never touch oil paint. And for me, I try to be cautious, but I'm not really good at it. So, it's one of those things. I know the risk of it, and I'm aware of it, and I try to be careful, and I do what I can to. It's almost like a smoker, it's like smokers know they're killing themselves, but they continue to do it. I know that life's bad for me, and I keep playing with it and not being careful. So that's my answer. I would say there's a video we have online that Louis did an excellent job of going through safety practices, and you can check that out. It's on our YouTube channel, and he talks about how careful he is with all of his materials.
Yeah, we were just talking about gloves. You're not wearing gloves.
Not right now. It's getting hot with them.
Yeah.
They're bothering me.
Yeah, yeah, because I don't like them either, and but it's that that type of thing with gloves, even because gloves add that artificiality and barrier to you being able to, and plus, yeah, they generate the heat as discomfort.
Yeah.
And if that discomfort gets in the way of you being able to paint, then perhaps you gotta take measures to mitigate that.
I was kind of joking around the other day saying that the thing that keeps me somewhat protected is that I don't actually paint that much. So I'm not the kind of person that wakes up at 8 o'clock and is painting till 8 o'clock. If I was around lead that much, I would have to be much more careful. But I'm doing so many things.
Yeah, you are.
I'm getting less and less painting time in, but that's, I believe in the projects that we're associated with, and so it's one of the trade-offs.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly doing well, though. Again, about that point, I'm very impressed.
This class is the most I've painted for probably 2 months.
Oh yeah, you've been out on the road. Well,
Yeah.
that's
You not paint on the road at all?
I did one painting that I'm doing that print release with, but that was it. And that's a personal choice. I mean, part of it has to do with a lot of travel, and if you don't have a studio on the road, then I've seen a lot of art, though. I've been to like several awesome shows and seen a lot of amazing paintings. So.
wow. Just out of curiosity, I know we talked about the Bouguereau. What other shows?
The Manet show.
Where's
and
that at?
That was in Chicago. And what was another one? Well, I saw the Telfair Museum for the first time in I became a member of that museum down in Savannah when we were down there. They had a Rembrandt show that had some of his etchings and talked about that. I was blessed with the opportunity to see a really amazing private collection that had some naturalist art, and it was like walking into a contemporary Frick. It was really
Wow, really?
It was really quite fascinating.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I got a question
Yeah.
about light effects in composition. How much do you consider light effects in composing your paintings, and do you use them for dramatic, poetic, or emotional impact?
Well, without a doubt. I mean, that's
You were talking a lot about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of my major things I think about when I'm looking is I don't know if I want to say wow factor, but certainly I'm always thinking about what delights me is usually the light effect of something. I mean, I'm always scanning around it. It could be something really simple. We were talking the other day about Sargent, and I keep bringing him up, don't I?
He likes Sargent.
You know, it's just that he reading about him, he can walk 10, 15 feet and plant himself and see something there, because he was looking. It wasn't the sidewalk or the flowers or the house or whatever. It was just that light effect, a juxtaposition of something that really contrasts itself well. And usually, to me, it's a set of contrasts. I talk about that, whether it's a very delicate, soft contrast that's beautiful, like a twilight, peaceful scene, or something that's something that kind of bangs at you, that really just, you know, a reflection in a window, a glint off a gold goblet, you know, of florals. You know, I like that punch of light in one area. But usually for me, it is that contrast, and that light effect is my driving force. The wind in the sails.
Mhm.
How's that? Can't add to that, can you?
Light effect. I like actually a really diffused light source. So when I built the custom studio in Argentina that I talk about often, I went out of my way to try to get a broad. So there was two light sources that I was really going after. One, the perfectly singular light source with not much ambient light in the room. So it was basically like a cement box with a beautiful skylight at the top. And then the other one was a cement box with the entire A-frame kind of roof, just a normal pitched roof that had semi-transparent plastic that would diffuse the light and scatter it into the room. And so it was really warm though, because the sun would hit it. And so what I did was I bought a black fabric that allowed half the amount of light to come through. And so it kind of created like a half shadow. And the thought behind it was, if the sun is hitting something and it's a warm light and it creates a cool shadow, if I can just make that half as much, it would cool down the room. And it actually did. It helped a lot. So that's what I had. I had this opaque, semi-opaque plastic with a kind of half shadow fabric that would allow half the light to come through. So I was looking for that very subtle kind of, almost like I don't know what the naturalists did, but they built glass studios. And I've never been certain how they controlled the light in those glass studios. Because I've seen pictures of them and all they are is a glass box. So I don't know if they would just wait till an overcast day and then go out and paint in them. Well, so they would only use them half the time.
I didn't even know that they had that. So that's news to me.
They had outdoor, Daniel Ridgway Knight, Messonnier did some of that stuff, I think. Lepage did, and I think they all lived close too.
Well, that's interesting. It sounds like a really neat thing to have and to do, but I would think that would be difficult, controlling that. You would need to...
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is maybe they just used it when it was appropriate. Yeah.
How much time do we have? I'm just curious.
About 50 minutes.
50. Okay, 50. Okay, all right, good. Oops.
Maybe to kill some time, because I'm almost done, I could talk about different kinds of brush strokes. How could I do it? I'll clean off my palette, maybe. All right, so
do you do this at all? I'm gonna show something. For me, I get paint buildup. I tend to Some people use palette knives to mix paint.
I don't a lot. I only do it if I'm working on a big painting.
Yeah.
But for smaller paintings, I wouldn't recommend it.
Do
you do it?
No, I usually, but the paint builds up in your paintbrush. So what I've been doing is, I take my palette knife and pull that out that way. So,
yeah.
And then I get I can clean my brush. I get a nice
Instead
angle.
of putting it into your paper towel, then you save.
Yeah, and then I save some, and that is kind of nice. Then I'll apply paint.
That's good. Because I waste a lot of paint doing that. I just clean it and it goes right into my paper towel. And I throw it.
Oh yeah. Well, that's another point though too. Another little point is I've seen people almost between every brush stroke dip in the solvent, re-clean their brush, and I use the solvent very little.
Yeah.
And I just I use the paper towel a lot.
Do you switch brushes? Keep it like if I organize my brushes a lot, then I don't have to clean them as much. So if you have like I haven't been doing it today because it's the third day, but especially in the block-in, I'll have a background brush, a green brush, a red brush, a light green brush. And so then I don't have to clean as much. I can just switch out every time I go to a new subject or a new object.
That's very, I do that too. That's what I mentioned. I have like that's what I was doing, black background. Tabletop was a different color, so I have to clean it. One other thing too that I talk about in my classes is solvent and these cups and all that. I tend to just dip my brush in. Let me just use a different brush here because I want to use that paint. But instead of swooshing it around in there, I allow that capillary action. That's for you, Louis. To pull this up into the brush, and then you just rub it around here, and then wipe it off. And that way, you're not polluting and dirtying your solvent all the time. And I think it's a really good way to just, instead of sloshing around and getting your... So the same thinking that I apply with putting a bead of paint that I can chew away at, I'm very careful with my solvent. And by the way, the other thing too with solvents is I reuse my solvents. Do you?
You let
the things, it actually precipitates.
Settle to the bottom.
Right, and then so that in my, I have a little glass jar that, at the end I pour my solvent in, turn it upside down, and it runs into the cap. So the next day I can clean the cap away, and then it's, it's ready to go again. So there's little tips for retrieving it.
Yeah, I like that one. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, stick around. These are things, though. There are little tips, though, that I just thinking about little things, and for saving paint. Do you save paint at all? I'm just thinking because we're getting near the end.
I don't a lot.
Okay.
So.
But I tend to save paint, and the way I've been saving my paint, and maybe somebody could correct me. But anyway, I'm thinking about, I take a piece of vinyl and I put my colors on this vinyl, and then I submerge them in water. And I could leave them overnight. And then the next day I pull that vinyl out, put my colors back out, because the oil paints repel water.
Yeah.
They don't mix into it. So, and then the air is what's drying it out, all that oxygen. So I figure that keeps it, and it's been very successful for me from hardening up. I do it. I used to do it in the freezer, just putting it on parchment paper, wax paper, and then in Minnesota, since we have a freezer outdoor 6 months of the year, you just put it outside your door.
Put your palette outside. Yeah.
But these little things like that are just little tips that are really nice for people that help you save a little bit of money in the oil painting business. So you could buy, what's that white called? Stacked white?
Stacked lead white, and be able to afford it.
Yeah, so you can afford it.
I'm gonna quickly show the idea of brush strokes. And so someone was asking about my fan brush, And so if I take my fan brush and I can deposit a certain kind of broken color like this on a larger surface with the fan brush. So that was one way of using it. These round brushes, I do a lot of the stems and the greens with the rounds, because you can drag it like that, or you can drag it, start out fine and then press down and then come back to a fine. And so I'll think, sometimes I'll think about the form as I'm doing that. So if it's lighter on top, I'll revisit something. I've done in the past, I drag my brush like this, I roll it. Oh, the other thing too is when you dip up here and you clean your brush, right? Let's say you clean off your brush and you dip here. Well, only 50% of your brush has paint on it, or maybe even less. So if I'm scumbling a passage, I can use this part that's close to the ferrule to move paint around, and if I have paint on my brush, I can deposit it and then I can push it around on the surface and then use that area that has paint to make a stroke someplace else. So you're using the fact that this doesn't have paint to your advantage. That kind of thing. What would be another one? Even just thinking about using your brush, if you're like drawing with it as far as a pencil, you know, if you're doing that kind of thing, or if you're depositing more thicker paint, you're dragging and you see it starts to break up. If you turn your hand and you hold it like from the outside, you can lay broken color on an area, so it's not so much of that modeling. If I model something, if I'm carefully figuring out the form, I will hold it like a pencil. But then if I'm creating some kind of color effect that I want the broken color to exist, I'll leave a stroke like that, and it just deposits a portion of it. So those are just some of the things that I'm whipping around doing this whole time.
That's good. That's good to show. Yeah, very good.
Got a question from Marianne asking, are the pink flowers in Michael's arrangement Lisianthus?
I believe so. Is that right?
Well,
are those Lisianthus?
Yes, I believe they are.
That was all.
Oh, okay.
So just to be kind of vulnerable and talk to people a little bit about what I'm thinking about right now. So if, let's say I'm finished or kind of finished and I'm sitting here staring at this thing, I like it, but typically with those dark flowers, they bother me when they're this like massive black. And so then I'll think of ways to, I got it about as dark as I possibly can, because I'm using pure black, ivory black, blue, and alizarin. And I just can't go any darker than that. So then I'll mix some ivory black and magenta or cobalt violet as that form that I'm seeing, and start to try to look in, and you see that the petals are all going from the center out. And so I'll try to create a little bit of variety here in some of this, just so it doesn't feel so dark.
Yeah, okay. What colors were you using there?
For the halftone, ivory black.
Yeah.
So I start with the dark neutral blue, and then I added magenta and cobalt to then bring it into.
Okay, yeah, okay. That's staying with, yeah. It's good. Do you get a couple colors on your brush at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like up here, let's say I have the burnt sienna and the viridian in yellow, then sometimes I just leave it like that and I'll make the stroke, and so then you have that whole glob of stuff happening.
You know, one thing that was a revelation to me too, you know, in these finishing stages, is that things have a dimension to it, like leaves have an edge, you know, that they're not just a flat plane against another flat plane, but I consider that you know, there'd be an edge to the leaves, you know, and all that type of thing, which is, for me, I'll cup it out and I'll roll it so I get actually a lip catching, you know, at times, and it gives a visual edge there. But I'm thinking about that now when I'm getting to that, to be able to apply paint thick enough to be able to achieve that type of leaf.
No, we haven't talked about it, I don't think, but do you squint down really far? I mean, even at this later stage, or you?
I still am, yeah. It's funny because I still am looking at the overall effect. I wanna be able to get that. I'm still walking back, and it's funny because you said that earlier today about the fact that now you're finishing and all that, whereas, and I can understand that. One thing is that I was playing a bit of catch up. I felt like I needed to, you know, get this. I felt like I was behind you, you know, with yours. So, but I needed to spend more time back, and I didn't. I wasn't still satisfied when I walked in and I saw it. So I needed to go over everything again. So I'm redoing it. But I don't want to lose that, and I used that mirror and then standing back right to the very end.
You do, yeah.
I do, and so I am, squinting down, and I am going to wrinkle a lot earlier.
Well, I think a lot of people are probably really excited about seeing this kind of development because, as they say, they're on their own search, but they just relate, you know. I remember one time a lady came into the studio, and we were all really excited to see some of Lewis's older work. He had done portrait work from before he stayed in New York.
Oh yeah.
And his after, and we incorporated it as part of a lecture that we did at the Portraits Inc. But one lady who came into the studio actually preferred the older work. I don't know if you remember that, but we were like, whoa. You know, we were fascinated how different and how much better and the newer work was, but she preferred the older one. And so I think it just goes to show that there are a lot of people out there that, you know, like there are people out there that don't like tight painting, you know. That's, as we kind of alluded to when we were checking out the Dutch, I think we both kind of tend to be more towards the Impressionists when looking at that really refined work. But
yeah, I'm with you there. I'm thinking here about one of my early experiences while I was still at the atelier and going into a gallery with my watercolors. It was in Wayzata, Raystock, I remember, at the Water Street Gallery. But I remember I showed him some of my pieces, and I remember his words. He says, I would take these pieces now, but if you work into them, I don't want them anymore. You know, and they were just, they were incomplete, you know, and I don't know what I was doing, you know. I'm thinking now, what was I showing him incomplete work? But, you know, for whatever reason, because he knew I was studying at the atelier too, I think, and he didn't want anything refined. It was a contemporary more. And so it was kind of neat because I could sell it to him incomplete pieces, you know, so, but that, he liked that rough edge and, you know, stuff that was more like that, so that was kind of funny. But
you know, something happened, again, to just mention Jeff again, when we were filming his video, he did this, so he did fish, right, in a bucket.
Yeah.
And he worked on a canvas, I think. but it doesn't matter. He had a white ground, and he had a big brush, and he had this wash of brown, and he suggested where the fish were. He did a line. But then, like, he worked on that, it wasn't very long, and it was this graphic shape of just some linear stuff. But then he went in and he started establishing his highest chroma blue and his black and his white, and it looked like a t-shirt to me, and I wanted to like take a shot and make a t-shirt of it, because it was just so graphic and cool looking. I was like, that's sweet. And no, you know, it's just one of those moments where it was like, if he stopped 30 seconds in, I would have made a t-shirt of it.
Isn't it?
But it was like weird, because it had these little patches of yellow and blue and black and white, and with this really kind of graphic linear thing.
That's cool.
And it looked really awesome. So let's see. So still,
That's funny. Is that I don't remember Jeff's. Did he talk about that? Speak to that?
in his documentary? No.
Yeah. Oh.
No.
Because Jeff was my instructor, of course. I don't recall him starting that way. I mean,
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it's changed a little bit over the years as everyone kind of.
Or else he didn't tell me the full truth.
You're like, he didn't teach me that way.
That's it. He told Heidi.
That's funny.
This reminds me of the Smothers Brothers. That was. Do you ever watch the Smothers Brothers?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Mom always liked you best. That was it. It's just.
There's the one in the twin brothers.
Yeah, yeah. Tommy and Dickie Smothers, they were pretty funny.
So I wanna try something, and this is
All right.
I'm gonna probably freak both of the production people out right now. But one person, if they can mute their computer and call me and just chime in and say hi, because we'll get an echo if you don't mute your computer. So my number is, and just I'll give you a second to get a pencil. It's 347 255 9492. 347 255 9492. So I'll put you on speakerphone. You can just tell us what you thought of the workshop. And please make it kind if you do call. You're like, yes, it's the worst.
All right.
Because the reason why I want to try that is because I want to see how interactive we can get. Radio does it often, but they have a whole crew of people on switcher. You know, they screen calls, and so.
Nobody wants to be the voice on the other side.
One volunteer. 347 255 9492. All right, we got a call from Hartford, Connecticut.
Hartford, Connecticut. Hey. Hello, Hartford.
Hello, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. Can you tell us your name?
This is Marianne Innes.
Hello, Marianne. Nice to hear from you.
Is this actually Michael?
It is, yes.
Oh, okay. There's not a radio screener, as you said. I have loved this. I've taken some of your other courses too. I love the interaction between the two different, both you and Rick.
Mm-hmm.
And I love his sense of humor.
Excellent.
When he said at the parochial school that when they said the Our Father in Polish, he thought they were praying to him. I thought, okay, that sets the tone for this whole thing. He's got a great sense of humor.
That's good.
I love the softness of your foliage.
Okay,
And
yeah.
even though he is the Impressionist school, I think that you have a lot of those same skills that you've merged with
Absolutely, yeah.
representational.
Yeah. So yeah, Rick was a huge influence on me. So I carried that all the way through in New York, I think, and I never forgot it. So.
Well, I think you're doing a great service for all of those artists like myself that are hoping and wishing we had more chance to study. So,
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Marianne. This was a
Thank
fun
you.
test.
Did it work?
It did, I think. Yes.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
Good.
I appreciate
Thanks.
it. All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's cool. That
See, that was
wonderful.
fun, right? They just that worked great. She did a good job muting her TV. That would be the only thing. My fear is that like it would be tough to, because you'd be like, no, you didn't mute it,
Yeah.
and then the echo, because they want to watch when I respond, but it's a delay.
They're about 30 seconds.
Yeah,
behind.
right.
It's 30 seconds?
About that. By the
Oh,
time it gets
oh,
to
okay.
finish everything,
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. There it is.
See, it puts a voice to the name. She was sweet.
That's a really nice way. Boy, if that live stream with live, instead of just, to,
Yeah, right.
but there is a delay there. So
Well, there's just there's a delay, and then there's the challenge. It creates a production, because what they do on radio is they have callers, and then they let it through, and there's all kinds of stages before, so it just creates
Oh, okay.
And if you get too much echo, then it will get
feedback,
So it's
right?
horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so when people call into those talk shows and all that, they have to mute, and that's what the guys make them do all that.
Yeah, they
To
get after them.
make
They get
sure.
upset if they don't, because they tell them like a million times to mute their radio.
Usually they
Or turn it
they
down.
talk to people before they even go on.
Yeah.
Tell them what to do. You got about 30 minutes, just under 30 minutes.
Get out of here, really? No, I'm kidding. No.
Now or never.
Yeah.
No regrets.
It's funny, in reality, just doing this, it is different from the way I paint. I find it's difficult, if I could say this, in the sense that I do like to walk away for a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. So
and
3 hours straight.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
yes. I think he would miss me, but I thought about it. But it does really help to walk away. For me, I find this very difficult because it's, I don't know, it's like you have to close your eyes and not look at something. Getting a fresh eye is, I think, important. So, do you?
Yeah,
Do
I
that
mean,
too?
if I sit while I work, but I usually don't sit for 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
So like I'm dying to get up right now.
Yeah. Yeah, this is grueling. I mean, in a way, because it is unnatural, and I thought that's good for people to know that this is not the way you or I really do this all the time. So
yeah, it's important to.
They didn't tell me this when I signed up, so. Oh, they did. You did tell me, so I'm kidding around.
You've been a good sport. Did a great job.
So if anyone, again, well, I'll just say if they have questions, I mean, it's coming down to the wire. If they're yeah, get them in, and because especially if you're live watching, just to, you know.
Yeah, at the end, we always like to tell people to email and tell us if they enjoyed it, and you know, if they didn't, sorry.
Yeah, that feedback is important. You know,
Yeah.
I say that at the end. Go back.
Oh, somebody did mention something about the background color, I think, affecting the. I didn't actually answer that. I don't know if we did or not, but wherever the forms are turning and facing the background, or like in this instance here with my leaf, you know, I have shadow inside, and all the parts around it are being affected by the background color. If I've done in the past, I've done like a turquoise background just to see what it does.
Oh yeah.
And it affects all of it.
Yeah.
You know, it makes it so. For me, I think, you know, you don't want the foliage to be cut out, and so you try your best to see that atmosphere and see how they correspond and feed back and forth.
Yeah.
We had a question, Michael, asking if you're going to leave the background as is.
Yeah, at this point I am. There's always a little bit of fiddling that I may do, but I'm happy with how it sits now. And it's always easy to fix that. If I decide to finish it out, it's harder to leave it than to finish it. So, you know, if it's sitting and my wife says, I really don't like that background, then I jump on it and fix it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's...
So I'll finish it if I have to, but that's easy to make up. I'm just undecided if... I usually don't paint the same color background as the table. So potentially I could set up a wood table where they would create a reflection or something and a dark edge here. That would also help with this dark mass here being so dark. If I had a dark down here, it would pull it all together.
That's true.
So that kind of thing. I'd let it dry and then just repaint it from imagination. That painting that I did for the print, that was actually, that whole vase is made up. The whole bottom half is made up. Yeah. Because it was in a tall straight vase, and I just turned it into a circle vase.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
well, that's pretty neat. Yeah, that's
so
good to
like
know.
I can pick and choose and design and do things to then just. It was a little bit hard to get the right effect on it, but in the end, I was happy with it.
You know, saying that, I'm gonna do something that I did yesterday too, and I just think it's important that, you know, because this is what I do all the time, is I take my piece off. And if I could, I actually have a tape back here. Right, and you know, for me, I always do this before I look at things that way, you know, and for me, right away, I see things I don't like, you know,
Right.
edges, things I want to disappear, unity or edges that I want to be gone here. It just changes the look, you know, maybe too quick a break here between this and makes too much of a line. I wanted that line to kind of come down that way there. You know, I can see if I have things out of sync, you know, with roundness, vases that are tilted, you know, you don't notice a lot of things when you're just looking at it the right way. So you can turn your piece over. I find it's a lot better than standing on your head. So, but to turn your piece over really helps.
Let's see, can you pass me the mirror once? I'll try the mirror thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it works better.
It might look cool.
That's if I'm invited back, I'll do that. I'll say that right now. So let's save that one for next time. But you know that then I use this pad. That's what I like to use this wedge for, is to be able to now take things like this and then just kind of like this edge. I'm going to lose that a little bit more back here. And I'm following the shape of that vase and pulling it around that way, and that helped me in that sense. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll follow again the forms. They were painted downwards, and now I can kind of do this where I'm just kind of. It could be done the other way, but it really is helpful, I find, if I work this way. I don't know if you're able to see exactly this.
Yeah, I got a camera this way.
Okay. But following this really helps. So now I roll that back that way. I'm gonna just kind of, there's some inconsistencies that. So this, I call this patting down, and it's a process I do on all my paintings, and I'll sometimes spend a lot of time just, and this is where I said, when Michael, we were talking about that, where we talked about finishing stages and what you're doing. In the end, this is where I use more of, what is that, academic kind of look instead of the impressionist. I'm thinking about the flowers themselves, the forms, you know. In my landscape paintings, you know, a lot of times I put down so many notes, I don't even know what some of the things are that I'm doing. I'm resisting telling a story here. My wife told me, promised me, well, I think I'll hold back on this story I have. But anyway, you know, a lot of times you don't know what you're actually seeing because either my out of focus or I was painting so fast. And sometimes that's where a photograph would help you to, you know, oh, that actually was, you know, something here, or that was a leaf, or this was that's a car over here, and a person walking with a red, because I put down so many notes that I see that I don't really allow myself to look into the image a lot. So that's where I would really find photographic evidence helpful. But after I do this, I do flip it back, and that's why I'm leaving myself a little bit of time to see nature again, to see if I lost what I really actually desired to keep. I don't want to lose something that was valuable. This is interesting because I'm having borrowed your well, not borrowed it, you gave it to me. This canvas, it has all this texture, and it's kind of interesting to just allow that texture in the background to kind of come through and all that.
Got a question from Blake, who's asked, Well, he said he's learned a lot. Your conversations have been informative. Do you consider colour above value or the opposite, or are they equal?
I think they're inseparable, but what do you think, Rick?
Yeah, they're kind of inseparable, and if I had to choose between the two, what would you say? All right.
That's a tough one.
That's okay. Well, to me, I'll speak. To me, I always say, and for me, value trumps color. You know, I go back to like even a portrait of a face. If you got all the values right, and the color is really off, people could still recognize the form and see that person. But if you got all the colors right, but the values were off, you would lose form. It really is the flow of light, and the flow of light is going to either make something lighter or darker, and value. So I think that, to me, value definitely trumps form, and I search for that. And if I'm wrong in the color, I'm not as concerned as I would be if I'm wrong in the value. I think that would throw it off.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree with that. I think that's values essential, and color can vary. In the sense that I've seen people just throw different colors in, not the color they're seeing. They have the value right, but they just kind of do different. As long as the value's right, you can make it. You can create some artistic freedom with just changing the color. So the mirror was useful.
Oh, was it? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Marianne's asked a question, Rick, saying, she's asking, did you deliberately put a triangular dark shape between the white rose and the orange flower?
Oh, wait, let me see where that is. Can you read that again, or say that again? The,
I assume from that reaction, no, it's not deliberate. But
Yeah.
did you deliberately put a triangular dark shape between the white rose and orange flower?
Oh, dollop, yeah. You know what that is? That is the light that's causing that reflection. It really is more of I think it's the
textural
light,
thing?
yeah. Yeah, and no, I didn't even notice that too much. No, it wasn't deliberate. Oh, that really does show it's like the North Pole. I mean, it's directly in the center too. Thank you. Totally unintentional. That's interesting, isn't it? Well, they're paying attention. That's good. You know what? Yeah, it's actually a piece of purple paint. You know what? I'm going to remove that, actually. And I did want something there, but not that. So that's funny.
I think with the mirror, I think when I look at it, I think what the mirror does is you get in the habit of leaving something for the wrong reasons. So the mirror then shocks you out of that and gives you a fresh alternative.
It does. It's like a fresh eye. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of saying it. I think you're right.
You don't usually use the mirror, though, do you, Michael?
No. But I think everybody that I know does. For some reason, I've just resisted it. I don't know.
That's interesting.
Have you ever used
Yeah, and maybe it's to do with, I stopped measuring too. So there's a lot of things that like I stopped doing on principle. So,
Why would you stop measuring?
because I felt that you could train your eye if you stopped relying on tools. So measuring, what you're doing is you're taking into consideration two physical, like let's say it's the thing in the size of the vase to the width of the.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just look at it and I recognize that there's some angles involved and some tilts, and that I can do the exact same thing if I stop doing this, if I just look at the drawing. If I just look at where I'm wrong, and so with the mirror, that's the same way. This allows it to be easier, and it's like it gives you a fresh eye, just like measuring. But I try to train my eye to not do that, and I try to correct it based off of what I'm looking at. So it's just a principle, like a thing that I've decided to.
But would you encourage like students?
Yeah, usually there's
measuring to a point.
It depends on if they like. To me, I felt like and they're just like, I'm trying not to influence anyone one way or another. I think you can do whatever you want. Like, it's like some people who say don't use black. I think that's just dumb. You know, it's a neutral blue. Why would you not use black? You know, so you know, that's probably what you're saying about measuring in the mirror. Like, why would you not use it?
Yeah, well, when you don't know, you know something's wrong. It doesn't look right, and then you can measure it. You know, but that's just the artist. You know, that's used. You know, measuring was always that way. I would think
sorry to interrupt.
Advanced. You know, I'm just wondering. I could see what you're saying.
What about like a plumb line? Like, I could use a grid. I've done that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I've used a grid, and it makes it easier. So it's not like I'm totally against all of that stuff.
Okay,
I just, for the most part, I find it, if you could draw the figure really well without a plumb line or without a grid, that's even cooler. You know, that's even better.
Yeah, I think I'm
the mirror is a tool. It's just
a tool.
like anything else. And
it could be a crutch, you know, doing it where you're carrying around a tool belt with plumb lines and triangles, and you know what I mean. You know, honestly, and you don't feel comfortable unless you pull out every device to do that. Yeah. So I guess I could see that, but you know, we went through this whole thing with students. There's certain tendencies that happen over and over again that you need a plumb line. Plus, just the sense of looking at and seeing what lines up with what. You know, it's such an easy principle in a way, but people forget that, and you can get away from that and just you don't see it. And I think, especially during my student days, that really helped to be able to line up, and you need that. And that's why I think the foundation, like academic, like the Atelier teaches that. And we use plumb lines to be able to do that all the time, but you're right, I haven't used a plumb line for a long time. Yeah.
We've got about 6 minutes left. Michael, is it worth me trying to get a close-up on your painting?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
I might try and bring this over. So I've got to go through.
I can, oh, okay. Yeah, that camera. Sure. You need me to push it that way?
Yeah, probably. I'm trying to take you a bit closer. Just going to come in over it.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, they were always seeing yours crooked at a pretty raking
Yeah.
angle.
Mm. Yeah. Just for the sake while you're there, Joe, some of the things I was illustrating here with this and the broken color, it's pretty washed out now because I had done that brush mark thing, but a lot of time in the last day, my palette starts to get more and more broken up in these big chunks of paint because I'm using a smaller brush, so the mixing, if I'm doing something, it starts to get more stringy and more divided. So there is like, I'll have a note and I'll put it down and it leaves all that broken color. So I'm intentionally not mixing these two, because if I wanted to try to get more of a magenta note, I would come over and I would just break it open. And so you're leaving options, and then all of a sudden my palette starts to be full of all these different mixes that I have done. All right, well, we're getting close to the end.
3 minutes left.
About 3 minutes? Oh, yeah.
Try to post reveals if you want it.
We do
Oh,
close up
okay.
the grid.
Yeah, that would maybe, yeah.
Oh no,
What up?
I think everything just froze.
Yeah.
We're losing everything.
Well, it's on the wide, so if it's still live, I can just sign out.
Close it.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if it's going to pick up the edges. I didn't want these edges. I want to push them down.
Still live?
Just give it a sec.
It's still frozen.
It's on the wide. Should I just cancel it? Finish it up?
Audio's still going.
Hmm.
Just try once more, closing it down.
You just play it completely.
Yeah, you can do that.
It's nice, Rick. How do you feel about it?
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the fact that it was nice. I really like using the surface
Okay.
that I have here and all that, which is really nice. So that
What's that?
It's just the whole app's frozen.
Oh, should we close it out?
Where we are.
Well, we didn't get to say goodbye, huh? It's kind of like our proposals. Didn't quite go as planned, but
Yeah, man. Joe, you missed that conversation last night. It was pretty funny. We all told our proposal story. We all told our proposal story, how we
To our
proposed to our wives. Oh, man.
Mike and mine were
Quite the
very
group.
similarly lame. But Louis had such a romantic way of doing everything there. It's just like backfired.
Oh, it looks like I got some. Sorry, guys. I got more. I got several voicemails.
Oh.
One person says, through a text, she says, this workshop has been great with a combination of unique demos, high quality visuals, two old friends talking and imparting a lot of wisdom. It's the first time I caught a workshop live and I love it. Thank you, Michael and Rick, plus crew. Paul.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
great.
that's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, it's neat. It's one of those things where I really, I really believe in the format in the sense that, like, because for my workshops personally, I always feel bad that people can't see or hear, but with this, we're mic'd up so they can hear. I'm not mumbling into the canvas if they're 12 feet back. They can see because they're literally like, if someone was standing here, they'd be like breathing over my neck. But the camera doesn't affect any of that. So they can see the best seat in the house. They can ask questions. They don't have to travel. It's somewhat more affordable.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, that's why I said, when that person asked about where to study, I should have immediately just said here, because I think, you know, this is the best right now. I think
I'm trying to open it up for people.
You know, with the ideas of what you guys have, and with your traveling around and the number of people you've now have met. And through your last ventures, I mean, you used to go around to everybody's studio. I mean, it's you have an opportunity to really open this up. And if you could take this, what would be kind of fun is to take it into different studios too, because usually that's not available. You talk about Dan Gerhardt's, you know, like seeing him, his home. We could sneak into Paul Oxborough's.
He won't.
When he isn't there. No, Paul, we're kidding. If he somehow is going out, this is awful.
He won't watch.
But you know that if we could go to different, I think that's really interesting to be able to see that. And that's what you were doing. But to be able to give a workshop at a place, a location where people see the way they do it there. But I think this is really good though too. I think it's throwing back ideas, and especially if you can get comments and questions, and it's this banter that
makes it really interactive.
I think so. I think it's a good format. Are we done now?
Close. We're gonna try to get a close up on your painting. So.
Oh, I see.
Unfortunately, we've restarted everything and it's still frozen.
Oh really? Oh, so we're just gonna sign out then and see if, I don't know, the YouTube feed may still be going. So we just want to personally thank Rick for flying out and doing this. This is great.
Well, thanks for asking.
This has been a lot of fun.
It's been a blast. That's what I knew it would be, but
that's great.
Thanks.
So thank everyone for tuning in and just supporting what we're doing. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, that it's harder for us to get back to questions. So unfortunately, if you missed the live stream, that's one of the elements that we can't add to. But if you want to send us emails about just any thoughts, suggestions, comments, those are welcome, and we appreciate all feedback. So until next time, we'll see you around. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know if you'll be able to close it out now or not. So I actually